probably heard this before. Um, but good morning. I'm Hannah Birdsong Fetters. I'm the program manager for our Southwest Colorado SBDC. We serve the 5 counties in Southwest Colorado and the 2 tribes. So we offer no-cost consulting, low-cost trainings, and then a leading edge business course twice a year. So if there's anything you ever need help with, I'm your contact person. I can set you up with the right consultant, or if you have suggestions for future trainings, please let me know. We're always wanting to figure out how we can best serve the small business community. So if you need any of our contacts, Mary Shepard is the director of our program. Again, I'm the program manager, and then Kiki Hooten is our disaster recovery coordinator. So if you need any assistance with COVID-related items, you can contact her. We do have a list of upcoming workshops if you'll go to the next slide. So yesterday we had the first part of this nonprofit series where we talked about fundraising with Linda, and then today we're diving into part 2, how to tell your story. And then next month we have a QuickBooks Online webinar series. So we broke it up into 4 parts because 8 hours on Zoom is horrible. I don't know who would ever do that. So we're doing 2-hour sessions to keep it manageable. And then we do have a fun partnership with Grow with Google, where we're going to be offering some marketing workshops once a month with Google. So that's us. If you have any questions or need assistance, then reach out. But for now, I'm going to pass it back off to Linda.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Since we do have some new folks, we're going to do some quick introductions, and I'll just call on you. So let us know who you are in your organization. And since we're talking about foundation and grant funding this morning, if you could just briefly tell us about how much experience or what kind of experience you have in this world. So I know if I have some absolute beginners and some people with 20 years of experience, so we can make sure that we talk to everybody during the class. So Gay, you are up first.
Okay, Gay Keene with the Animas Museum. I have never written a grant in my life, but we do have a couple of people, Susan Jones, and we've had an AGPRA grant. We've had some Community Foundation has helped us. So we do have grants. The problem with grants, as you all know, is that very often they're tied to a project. And when we have no staff and we're all volunteer, we're not looking for a lot of big grants that we have to manage at this time.
Good. Okay.
It's got to be there in the future.
Good. Thank you, Gay. Appreciate it. Jeremy.
You know, I think I'll pass it to Sharon, who's also from Mountain Studies Institute, and I think it'd be more apt for answering this for our group.
Okay. Sharon.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, Linda. My name's Sharon Cooley. I'm with Mountain Studies Institute, and there's several of us here. Okay. Coincidentally, on Thursday mornings, once a month, we have a meeting about our grants, and we decided, well, let's join this morning. So it was a perfect timing for us.
Good.
I come with about 20, I like to say 20 plus, so I don't age myself too explicitly, but 20 plus years of experience in more of the federal contracting world. I was working in international development and doing a lot of, USAID, World Bank, State Department type cooperative agreement and contracts proposal business development. I moved recently to Durango and am so excited to work for Mountain Studies Institute, but the nonprofit grant world is newer to me. So I'm really excited to learn and be a sponge today.
Okay.
Would love our team members to introduce themselves individually though. So
okay, so we have
Jeremy is with our community. Yep.
Okay.
Marcy Bidwell, our director, our executive director.
Hi, Marcy.
And I see someone is from the Forest Health Program, but I'm not sure who that is.
Is that's connected to you?
Yes,
Forest Health Program?
I believe so.
Okay. 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 Forest Health Program,
so.
Are you there? Yes. Maybe? No.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't realize that I showed up as Forest Health. And I also will apologize. My Wi-Fi is not letting my camera come through. But my name is Haley Farwell, and I am a research associate with Mountain Studies Institute.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay, so I think we got everybody from your org. We're glad to have you. Blair, we're going to pick on you next.
Oh, good. Pick on the new kid. My name is Blair Least, and I have recently become the executive director for the Southwest Colorado Multiple Sclerosis Society. And I do have experience in writing grants, but that happened to be many decades ago. So I am here to learn some new tricks, some new ideas, and generate some thought with all of you this morning. So
Great.
Thank you very much for being here.
Blair, remember the new term is 20 plus, not many decades.
Oh, 20 plus. That's right. I've got to go with that one. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back. Aaron.
My name is Aaron Couch, and I'm not associated with anything at the moment. I'm just trying to gather some more information for potential future projects.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
I don't have any experience with any of this stuff at all.
All right. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Let's see. Sarah.
I'm the business manager with the Mesa Verde Museum Association. I have been in the nonprofit world for 10 plus years. And I haven't done any grant writing, but I have assisted with gathering information, especially recently with the financial side of things. For grants. So I've done a little bit of assisting with the grant writing, but typically my EDs have done the heavy lifting on that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
just gain a little more and then pass it on to my colleagues.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome. Sharon, we got you. Marcy, we got you. In Holt. I don't know what your name is, in Holt, but
Hi, I'm Nicole.
Nicole.
I run Archuleta Housing in Pagosa Springs. We're an affordable housing Section 8 for elderly and for families here in Pagosa Springs.
Okay, great. Welcome.
I have 20 years of experience in nonprofits and have written grants, but it's been a long time.
Okay. All right. Good. Fallon? Tell us how to pronounce it.
Hi, it's Fallon.
Hi, Fallon.
Yeah, I work for the Good Food Collective here in Durango. I'm the AmeriCorps Vista member, and I have very little experience with grant writing, but I'm looking to be able to support the organization more, and it's just a really good skill. And so I've done a lot of trainings like this and then assisted with the process and kind of like written drafts and then sent them to my supervisor type thing.
Okay.
So just trying to get all the information I can. I think I'm going to call in actually because my Wi-Fi keeps saying it's unstable. So.
Okay. Okay. Whatever you need to do. We're glad you're here. Thank you. And I don't know. I have TCAFA. Who is that? Can you unmute for us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Carmelia Blackwater. I am located in Kayenta, Arizona. I happen to, I got some more other help from this organization before, and that's how I'm here. TCAFA stands for Twidinisha Committee Against Family Abuse Incorporated. We are a nonprofit. We are a domestic violence shelter located on the Navajo Reservation. We're not a tribal entity. We're a nonprofit organization. And we have been here in the Kayenta community for over 39 years. We are one of 2 shelters that covers all of the Navajo Reservation. So we are a nonprofit, and that's how we're here today. So good morning, everyone.
Good morning and
Morning.
welcome. Lynn Tanner.
Hi, I'm here wondering where Blair is. I'm a new member of the Southwest Colorado MS Society, and he let us know about this. We just hired him as our executive director. So this is all new things to me, but I am anxious to learn. So
Great.
thank you.
Welcome, Lynn. And Blair is here.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
here.
Okay.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi. Oh, there you are. Hi. I just have to look at everybody on the screen, I guess.
Okay.
You.
Briggen, is that how we pronounce your name?
Yes, that is how you pronounce my name. So I'm Briggen Rinkle from the Community Foundation, serving Southwest Colorado. And my camera is too high. There we go. I am here. I manage about anywhere from 5 to 8 grants a year for Southwest Colorado for the nonprofits, and we also write grants. And so I'm here both to listen and see what grant seekers are really needing, and also make sure I'm sharp as a tack for when we apply for grants to support the community.
Great. Thank you. And Amanda.
Yes, hi. So I work full-time for a nonprofit back where I'm from in Alabama. I've been working remotely, luckily even before COVID, so it was a nice transition for me. But here in town, I'm helping I Am Music just streamline and kind of get some ducks in a row as far as their grants.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Welcome.
Thank you.
You guys bounced around on me. Did I miss anybody? I think we got everybody. And good morning, Mary. Glad you're here with us. What's always interesting when we have a discussion about grants and writing proposals is that it is definitely something that we all kind of fall into. Any class that I've taught, I've never had somebody say, oh my God, I always wanted to be a grant proposal writer. It is just something that comes with what we do. I really didn't do much writing until my first ED job in nonprofit. So, it is, when we talk about telling our story, especially during these times, it is, if you're just starting out in it, it will help you learn so much about your organization and make your organization stronger. So let's go to... So as we talked about this yesterday in the seminar too, you guys, that when people talk about their organizations, things they're doing or not doing, or questions that they ask, that we please respect confidentiality as much as you can, because we don't want to go out of this seminar and talk about something else someone is doing. So please be very, very careful about that. So let's talk about this ugly pandemic for just a minute. Even though we're starting, to see a little bit of light in what's happening, it has affected our organizations in our sector so very much. We've seen nonprofit closures. We've seen people lose their jobs in this sector. So it's been a little bit rough. Most nonprofits have enough to survive something short, but something that's gone on this long has been really tough. So I don't want to say any of that to depress you. If you're still with us here today, I'm hoping that you are still going strong. So let's talk a little bit about how the grants world might have affected your organization. Are you getting fewer? Are they changing things? What's going on in your world as far as grants are concerned?
Well, we actually need grants because our funding from HUD is still coming in, but our tenants are not paying rent right now because there's an eviction on moratoriums and we can't charge late fees or anything.
Yeah.
So we are at a lack of funding right now. So I've got to apply for grants to make up for that loss. And also we're getting hit with a bunch of stuff that we have to fix. So I really need a capital grant. I need a capital improvement program.
Okay.
So
Okay. Nicole, how big is your organization budget wise?
We have 600,000 is our budget for the multifamily and 85,000 for the elderly.
Okay. Okay. So a good size organization. So,
yeah, we run 64 units.
Okay.
We have 64 units.
Okay. All right. Good. Anybody else?
This last year, with our typical revenue streams being severely impacted by the pandemic, we sought out more grants than we do usually. And we mostly wrote to local and state grants that were not any program specific. And that gave us a little influx of capital to get us through the year last year, and
nice.
Continuing to do the same this year.
So those of you, so in our fundraising world, in our development world, we talked about this again a little bit yesterday, that for years, those of us who've been doing this work, we've been preaching and teaching and learning that in our fundraising, we want true diversity. We want grants, we want corporate, we want individuals. And the more diversity we have, the better, right? So that we don't want a dependence on grants. But one of the things we've seen this past year is that some of the foundations especially have really stepped up and done what they've always done or done better. So those organizations who had been more dependent on grants are sometimes doing better than they had been. So there's some sort of ironies wrapped up in everything that's going on. Anybody else want to put their thoughts on the table about this? Okay.
Well, this is Brigham, and I can just concur with you, Linda. We gave out $4 million last year, which is more than double than we typically give. Philanthropists in general were much more giving, but I do think that there are some areas, specifically arts and culture, animals and youth, who didn't get that windfall of money. Human services did, anything with health. And so we're really looking at this year to make sure that we can support the whole sector and make sure everybody lands on their feet like a cat.
Thank you for saying that. We talked yesterday about individual giving, and that, during this rough time, like for instance, my husband and I, when we got our stimulus checks, that we turned around and we're not wealthy by any means, but we thought, okay, we really don't need this. There are people who need this more than us. And we wrote checks to our favorite organizations. But what did we do? Primarily Health and Human Services, the food bank, those kinds of things. And you're right, those others kind of went to the bottom of the list. And we don't, after this is all over, want to see our favorite museums and things go away. So thanks for sort of shining the light on that. We appreciate it. So let's, the thing that happened, and this is kind of what she was just saying. So with foundation giving, right, there have been some great emergency COVID grants. There's been great emergency support for racial equity, racial justice issues, right? There has been a push for foundations. The foundations have to give, there's that 5% rule, right? They have to give a certain amount on their net assets every year. So there's been a push to increase that, I think usually to 10% and hold it there for the next 3 years. Now, there's big debate. I looked at so many articles about this week, big debate about this, right? So the arguments against it have to do with the longevity of those foundations, right? If they start giving up a lot higher, their assets go down, they're not making as much money, will they be here as long as they need to, right? Then the argument for is really about they're needed right now, right? It's the present versus the future. So it's really interesting. And then in this giving, in COVID, racial equity issues, oh my gosh, that's wonderful, right? It's wonderful, but not all organizations benefited equally, right? So we're hoping now going forward, this is going to be more about, it has been about crisis, and we're hoping now it's going to be more about recovery. So the Council on Foundations also, they have something called the Philanthropy's Commitment During the COVID-19 Pledge. And so this is what they are asking of foundations. So if you are having conversations with a particular foundation, this is something great to broach. So that pledge that they're asking for, I think so far there's something like 800 foundations that have signed on. One thing they're going to do is loosen restrictions on grants. So Gay, your comment at the beginning about so many grants, right, being project and problem oriented, right, they're seeing that restriction might be difficult during this time. Also, this was the one that made me the most excited, is they're making reporting requirements a bit easier. Even if I enjoy grant proposal writing, reporting is the, oh my God, we got to do a report. Don't do as I do. So I love hearing about that. More unrestricted report, more community-based emergency issues. So there are some good things going on, and I do feel like they're paying attention. I do feel like they're stepping up to the plate. The Giving USA statistics, I just want to talk about the history again. So these statistics, are from 19. We don't have the hard statistics that Giving USA does from last year yet. We have some ideas about it, but we don't have the hard statistics yet. And I'm going to send this page to all of you guys because I think it's really important to understand, right? So year after year, no matter what, historically, giving is either flat, right, or has gone up. So no matter what has happened, except I think it's for 3 years in the last, since 1979, it has stayed flat or gone up. So we are still being supported. Those of us in this sector, we are still being supported. So when we look at these most recent figures from 19, foundation giving went up along with everything else. Foundation giving is, when we look at the whole pattern, is about 17% of the total. The only years that giving went down were in 1987, 2008, and 2009. That 8-9 recession time, things were rough. Remember, the foundations, their money, they have money, their assets, they're making money off their assets. When we went through that recession, even with our 5% rule, that number went down. So historically, if things continue, we're going to be in good shape. So the WHO declared the pandemic in March of last year. After that March date, giving went up, including foundations, right? And continued for the rest of the year. So we are a giving nation. Things are good in that. So I want you to feel a little more optimistic about it. So so I know I have new people, and people have been doing this for a long time. And I just want to make sure the terminology is really clear. When we are looking at our funders, we've done research on funders, and we find out what they want from us, right? So all the terminology is the same. You fill out an application, you write a proposal, they give you the guidelines. There is an RFP, request for proposal. Who is it who had all the Fed background? That is like acronym city. We have NOFA's, notice of funding availability, NOFO's, notice of funding opportunity, and it goes on for there. All it is the rules, the guidelines, the instructions, right? And you need to follow any instructions to a T, especially in the federal world, right? There are technical guidelines from everything from margin sizes to fonts to whatever. Those are the things, if we don't follow the rules, right, can get us booted out. And that's not the reason you want to be booted out. Now, also, even from one, say, federal agency to another, they might have different definitions of things. They might have different rules. They talk about indirect costs. They talk about in-kind contributions, how things can be counted, even expenses, right? How we can do mileage, what it's worth. So follow those. So I always read the requirements at the beginning, even of my local foundation. I do the work and then I go back and double check it again at the end. So make sure that you do that. If you are approaching a foundation, looking at a foundation, or looking at the government grants, if they offer any kind of workshop, webinar, technical assistance, make sure you're signed up to be a part of it. Even if you're not sure you're going to apply, you're going to learn things during that period that are going to be important going forward. Now, if you're thinking about grants and you're not sure, so there's a lot of reasons to go after them, and maybe for some of you, some reasons not to. Number one, we want to be really careful about chasing money. And I really want you to be careful about that. What you want to think about in your organization is sort of your whole planning process, right? So say there's a project that we're doing that maybe it's a new project, a new program. So if we figure out that project, what we want to do, how we're going to do it, what we're going to achieve, how much money it's going to take, how many people it's going to take, and then we go searching for the appropriate funder, right? We're not going to be chasing money as much. What happens if somebody walks into the office and said, here's a grant that's due next Friday, I think we could do this. It may or may not be the right thing for your organization. So you need to, in this process, be prepared also to say no to it. All the foundations and the government entities, I do teaching for the Grantsmanship Center, and one of the trainers has this line about, if you've met one foundation, you've met one foundation, right? So they're all going to be very different. They, like us, have missions and visions and those kinds of things. So we want to be linked up to the right ones. So the reasons to go after grants, or to add that to your portfolio if you're not doing it yet, well, sometimes we can get much larger amounts, right? If we have a base of individual donors and the donations are small and we really need to round that up, we may see some nice size grants out there that really might be helpful to our organization. Now, if you're an organization with $100,000 budget, you're not going to go after the $1 million grant. Sorry, that ain't the way it's going to work for you, but be realistic about it. Be realistic about amounts that you might want to go after. I've done work for many tiny organizations where if we got, that $1,000 grant, we were doing the happy dance in the hallway. That's the greatest thing, right? For some of you with larger organizations, it may not even be worth it to go after those. So be realistic about it. So larger amounts, sometimes getting those grants will really give your organization some added credibility. The reasons not to go after them, remember, the probability of getting them, especially that first time round, may or may not be very strong. So be realistic about that. There can be restrictions with them on what we can use them for exactly. So there's some tracking involved, some other pieces. And then sometimes, I don't know, the term dirty money is not strong, but there's there's sometimes if we're not in sync with the money from a funder, it comes with some implications that are not so strong. So on types of proposals, the at the beginning, I think when Gay was saying that a lot of them are project based, that is definitely still true. Which means that I have a project, I'm going to achieve a certain thing, I'm going to achieve certain outcomes, this is what's going to go. And the funder wants to support that project. So you can understand why they like doing that. Again, our mission is linked with their mission, and we're coming together and say, we're going to do this project and we're going to achieve the things we want to achieve, right? So it's about doing that particular thing. We have a problem in the community, an issue in our community, and this is how we're going to, together with the funder, work together to fix it, to change it, to make a difference. So the other kinds are capital. So we need the new building. Somebody talked about major repairs to infrastructure. If we need major vehicles, something like that, right? New HVAC systems. Those are capital. Again, all of these proposals, no matter what, always have to focus on not us as an organization, but those that we serve, right? So even a capital, it's not like we need a new building, so we're going to get a new building. We need a new building because we need the capacity to serve those in our community. Another type of proposal is a capacity building proposal. And when you see those, look very carefully at the definition of those because it really varies. Usually it is about infrastructure of my organization. So I need a new funder database and maybe the instruction on it. Or my board needs to be trained in fundraising, or something that builds my organization. Usually capacity building grants come from an organization, a funder that we already have a relationship with. And then the general operating grant is, sort of the holy grail. It's the one that we all want. And it essentially is that grant that helps us keep the lights on, helps us pay everything we need to pay. Again, that's great. It's about the organization, everything we have done in the past, we've been successful at, but always we want to focus on those that we serve. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention, which is not really a type of proposal, but a lot of times funders will ask for LOIs, and people think that that's sort of a piece of cake. I'm just going to send them a letter. And that's great, but you really can't do that. You can't really write that unless you've, again, gone through planning process and you know everything you're going to do, because that letter, even if it's a page or two long, it's very short. It's going to tell that potential funder, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to achieve. It's just in a shorter version. So when we talk about your messaging, so there's two things I wanted to mention. So in the different sections of your proposal, there is an abstract or an executive summary that kind of tells everything about your organization. And it tells a little bit about your organization, what you're going to do. It's always very, very short. So what we put into that abstract or that executive summary could be very similar to what we put into that LOI. I have a quote, which I always attributed to Pascal. I went to a seminar last week where he said it's Mark Twain. I'm not really sure, but the quote is, I meant to write you a shorter letter, but I didn't have time. So when we have these LOIs, the abstracts, the things that are truly limited, very short, does not mean that they're easier. Now let's stop for just a second. I've been talking a lot and see what kind of any questions that we have at this point.
Can you describe a little bit more the abstract versus the letter of inquiry? I get the abstract is a short version, the letter of inquiry, because I'm trying to work on a letter of inquiry.
So you bet. So the thing is that I say that they're similar because that abstract, right, is going to talk about my organization. Let's say I'm doing a project proposal. It's going to say something about my organization. It's going to say what the issue is in my community. It's going to say what the outcome is going to be. It's going to say how we're going to do it and how much it's going to cost. All of that in probably a couple of paragraphs. That's the same kind of thing that, and the same really shape and look that you want in that LOI. Sometimes they will ask particular questions, right, that they want to know about. But again, I just, here's my organization, this is what we do, is not quite strong enough. We want to have more to it than that. Does that help you? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Are you okay? And you can follow up with other things, or Nicole, if you have something that you're looking at, instructions, send that to me. And we can talk about it later as well. I'm more than happy to help. Okay. Anything else there? All right. Now let's talk a little bit about types of funders that we're going to be approaching, right? So we have private foundations, and then we have government entities, and then we have corporate funders. So in here, we're not talking about corporate marketing dollars. We're talking about corporations who have set up a foundation. So they have to follow the same, they are really part of that private foundation category. They are just tied to the corporate entity. So private foundations, just like our nonprofit organizations, have to file a 990 with the IRS every year. They are nonprofit entities. So we can then look at their 990s. We can look at databases. We can look at a lot of other things, but looking at that private foundation's 990, if you haven't done that, is and it's one you're really interested, is always great. What does that 990 tell us? And we can do that through Candid, or what used to be GuideStar. We'll take you there as well. It tells us, we can look at the last 3 years. We can see who they funded, for what amount, for what purpose. We can see who is on their board. We can learn a lot about that organization that we might not pick up just from, say, looking at their website, or they may not have a website. Government funders, right? So usually that I would say is kind of that heavier lift. So those of you with really small organizations may not be ready for this step yet, because there is a lot of detail, a lot of tracking, a lot that needs to be done. So if you think about looking at those and looking at grants.gov and kind of seeing what's out there, we can talk about how to do that search. Just remember, and so think about why they give away this money. The foundations are doing that because they've set up this foundation with this particular mission. This is what we want to do. This is what we want to achieve. And so we are kind of the tool for them to get that work done, right? So that's our connection with them. The government entities, we have local and city and state and federal, you know, they are giving away that money because there is a requirement to do so. There's new legislation. Maybe that, again, this is a good reason to get to know your representatives. They're fighting for money for their particular geographical area to solve a particular problem. We saw government funds come in for COVID. We've seen government funds come in for hurricane relief, all those kinds of things. So hopefully they're doing what they should be doing as well. And developing those pools of money for us. Okay, so these are the typical sections in a grant proposal, right? Now they're going to change and words are going to be a little bit different, right? So we mentioned that executive summary or abstract or whatever your funder calls it, right? The second is the information about your organization and your background. And then we introduce what an issue is in our organization, what the goals of the work are going to be, the methods or activities, and those are things that we're going to do, right? Those are the actions. A budget, we always have a budget for what we're proposing we're going to do. And then evaluation, and we'll talk a little bit more about evaluation. It's a tough one for a lot of people. And then the sustainability section seems to me to be becoming more and more important to our funders, right? Because they want to know they're going to give us money for a particular project. After that money is used up, we don't know if they're going to support us the following year or 2 years or whatever. So how is that project going to live on? How is the effect of that work going to continue? It's extremely important. Now, when we are thinking about, again, the telling your story piece, there's 2 sections that I want to talk about there. One is the organization's background, right? So they ask for background, mission, history, whatever. In that section is a great place to remember to talk about the stories and your successes, right? What we've done. In that problem section, again, there are personal stories, but they are about people who are animals or whoever we're serving who are experiencing those problems. So adding those kinds of personal touches as we go forward is great, right? So, and we have somebody here from a foundation. I always want you to think about, I do a lot of proposal reviews. I do more reviews now than I probably do writing, and I enjoy it a great deal. So those of you who are with foundations who have done this work, if I have a stack of 20 proposals on my desk to read, and they are all facts and figures and really great stuff, that's fine, right? They're done well, they're written well. But if I have that connection that, oh, this is the organization that helped Susie when all the employers moved out of town and they retrained and then she got a new job and things were wonderful. If there's a personal story that's connected to it, it makes a difference. I now remember that proposal for that. So that connection of heart and soul, mind and logic, or heart and logic is really important here. So as you are writing and thinking about the writing process, I always say I'm not like a great grant proposal writer. I am pretty good at it. If I could write everything in the world in bullet points, I would, right? That's how I think. That's how I develop things. And that's what leads me through, right? I bullet. It's kind of like writing outlines. Some of you are going to be doing this differently. You're going to just flow, right? So where my challenge is to take my bullet points and make them into something cohesive for somebody to read. The person who has big flowy language and lots of words may have to sort of go the other direction, right? And pull back and be more concise. So think about that. Also think about any of these sections, like that introduction, the organizational background section. I see people cut and paste that all the time and always put in the exact same thing. Please, please don't do that, right? Take a hard look. I mean, your history is your history, but we want to think about that target funder and what they want to know and what they want to hear about and what our connection is with them. I have an example of because I do interim director work for organizations, and an organization that I stayed with way too long, and but they had been in real trouble, right? So we worked really, really hard to get them out of the red. So I'm writing grant proposals for them, and the time period where we finally went from in the red to the black, right? So those funders who had supported us year after year, that was my success story to them. Oh my God, we finally did it. Here it is. For a new funder that I'm approaching, I might not want to point that out. They're going to look at our financials. They're going to see our history, all that kind of stuff. So my attitude and my target in talking to them is a little bit different. So let's talk a little bit about your organization. And I want you to think about the, I want to call it the knock your socks off kind of story. So, and again, if you don't think you have it at this time, I want you to, as you go, be collecting this information. There's nothing, I don't want you to sit down and write that proposal. And so, oh my God, I don't even know what to talk about here. What kind of success stories do I have? This is going to be something constant for your organization. You're going to think about what wonderful things we've achieved. Do I have a story of someone or something that I have served? Are there quotes? Or is there an award that we've received? Is it about our long-term commitment to the community? And remember that you need to be talking to people sort of constantly. I did work for a human services organization here that did sort of that basics of life thing, right? We did serving, we did food, and we did showers, and we did basics. And so it physically was kind of set up so the administrative staff was over here and the people who served the clients were over here, and which is not so good in itself. But sometimes especially if I was writing, I want to talk about the organization, I went back there and talked to some clients. It was that reminder of what we're doing, the reminder of how we're helping people, and things I could talk about in approaching our funders. So if you're going to tell me something wonderful that your organization did, what would it be? Come on and brag a little bit. I'll sit here and wait. Come on, brag a little bit.
Hi, this is Amanda. I can talk to this one because it's Alabama. So years ago, we went to a company. It was a private organization that's pretty well known, Alabama Power. And we said, hey, we have an educational program for my main job. We really want to grow throughout the state, especially where you have your entity. And I mean, we were going for like 100K ask, and we went in, over and over in all these meetings, and they came back and were like, okay, we really want to help you grow. It's a one-time gift of $250,000. And that was what took us from just North Alabama, where our base was. And now we're in 2/3 of the counties in Alabama. So we always state that one-time gift really launched us.
Good.
Once we get in a county, you can, network and see, get more local funding.
Good. And Amanda, what was it that they saw in your organization that made them say yes?
I think the one thing that was unique to us is we actually get into the schools and help the teachers. Okay. It's not just like here's a resource, good luck.
Okay.
So they saw, and we also have like a dynamic performance and some ways that we can show off their logo, which is always helpful for, those private organizations. Right. They want, corporate, they want that recognition somehow.
They do. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. And congratulations on that. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Carmelia from Totonisha Committee Against Family Abuse. One of the things that I put in our proposals is that we are one of 2 shelters that cater or that services the Navajo Nation. And we have a 45-bed domestic violence shelter. And, you know, all the border towns have their own shelters, and they do help Native citizens and stuff like that. But our biggest clientele is Native, and we do accept men in our shelter, and the LGBTQ community and teen dating. So we service a lot of victims of violence. So that is one of the biggest things that, and probably the only one on the Navajo reservation that does that.
Great. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So a couple of things about what she said. Sometimes it's that comparison, because I'll read something where somebody says, you know, we have, 50, we manage 50 housing for 50 people in our community. And it's as compared to anybody else, we're the only ones who do that or something. So remember, it's always relative. If I don't know your community, I might not know if it's a big deal. So always talk about that. Never assume that whoever is reading your proposal knows anything about you, about the organization, about your history, about who you serve, or about the region. So I had a development director who write proposals and always say, oh, they know us, right? And it just irritated the heck out of me, and so I finally just started saying, let's imagine that they have a brand new program officer who is reading our proposal. We want to be the organization that educates them about everything that's going on in Colorado Springs, about housing or about poverty or whatever. So do not ever make any assumptions. So any other, thank you for that. Any other bragging points before we go on? Okay, go
I
ahead.
have one. Oh.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Well, MSI was several years ago when there was the Gold King mine spill, where millions of gallons of mine waste, orange acid mine waste, was coming down the Animas River. We were able to get out before it hit the Durango area and start doing some water quality to get the baseline data and then continue that water quality monitoring. And so I think it really speaks to, our agility, adaptiveness, and meeting our mission of science that people can use, because of course, everyone is going to care deeply about what the impact of that is. And so it's a really compelling story. It's meaningful and it's true. It's authentic. But it's getting a little dated. And so how to, kind of continue to bring up, the water quality monitoring certainly isn't dated, but that was an event that happened several years ago. So how to keep things kind of current, how to keep science, citizen science people can use, exciting and compelling for that first paragraph.
Are you asking how to, or you're saying you need to figure out how to?
Both.
I'd be so happy to look at that paragraph with you if you want to email it to me. Hannah is going to send you my contact information. So I'd love to chit chat about that. And thank you for sort of recognizing that in your work. I mean, I had this situation where I was like doing that cut and paste thing for one of my organizations, for one of the arts organizations, and not really paying any attention. You go, history is history, right? And then, there was something in there about the founder and why it was there and all that kind of stuff. And then, and the founder had passed on. One day, there was a relative, I think the sister of the founder, who walked in. Hell, if I could remember anything. I mean, I just slapped that into so many things. And it was my opportunity to say, oh my gosh, thank you to you and your family. And I just absolutely, I'm a talker. absolutely drew a blank, and I was so embarrassed, and it made me go back and sort of retool that and think about it and think about the importance of that and keeping up with it. So I think and even if you're not making big changes, there might be something more recent that is maybe not as impactful as the story that you're telling. So we start out with something else and still keep that piece in. So just think about the retooling of it. Okay, so now that introduction or background or whatever section, again, if we think about that, that's history of your organization, our successes and how wonderful we are, what we did. The next one that I want to talk about with telling the stories is that and isn't this a pitiful little picture? The problem section, or it's the issue, it's the whatever. So the messaging again here is going to be about, you know, we've done history. Now we're going to talk about this is what is happening in my community right now, right? So I want, when, you know, sometimes it feels very negative in the stuff, in the work that we do, but I really want you to sort of tear my heart out here to talk about people who are experiencing homelessness or experiencing discrimination, or not about, say, just COVID, but how COVID has affected my community. When you talk about that, when you introduce this issue in your community, we want to be very, very specific. We want to say 20% of my 100,000 community members are experiencing poverty or experiencing homelessness or experiencing something with the education. So be very, very specific. When you look at your proposal as a whole, there are going to be connections in all those sections. So here, when we introduce an issue in our community, what we're going to say, we're going to be very specific, and then that is going to link to the change that you're saying my program is going to help with, right? So we start out with an issue, we're at A, we go to B, say, this is what's going to change. So we're going to be very specific here. So I just want to see if anybody has anything that they would propose talking about here. Please remember that, again, you as this grant proposal writer, so you cannot just do this in a vacuum, right? You have got to talk to people. You've got to talk to staff. You've got to talk to clients. You have to be very connected in collecting that data. So anybody want anything that you're working on problem wise in your community, something you're being faced with, and you want to go to a funder with this idea, anything that you'd like to introduce here? Well, I guess none of you have issues or problems in your communities. That's really nice to see.
Here's one. I've got one. So we are, there's an existing program called Colorado River Watch that does it's citizen science water quality monitoring with volunteers. And there are currently quite a few stations in our area being monitored, and they're sort of being run by Colorado Parks and Wildlife, but probably not for much longer. And they would like us to take that on as a nonprofit organization with funding from ... And so they suggested, you know, that we get a coalition of funders from local municipalities and counties in the watershed who are obvious stakeholders. And so that's something that we have in mind and are just kind of starting the planning on. How do we build this coalition of funders for this mutual goal?
Good. So and I want you to think about also when, especially something like that, that what happens if we don't do this, right? So what's the long-term implication? Or sometimes it's, or if you want to take a more positive spin, if we do this long-term, this is going to happen, right? So we're always going to have this starting point, and then it's going to lead from, again, from A to B. Sometimes that is interim. Sometimes they're, with something that big, anything that's environmental, anything, it's longer term. But what we're going to do to get that, and this is a result in year 1, year 2, year 3. Same thing if you're working on something that has to do with a disease. Say we can't solve it in 1 year, but we're going to have interim steps, and these are the results that you funder are going to see in this amount of time. Okay, so let's oh, you know what, you guys, let's just take a 5-minute here, pause for the cause, and grab your coffee, whatever you want to do, get up for a minute, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes and finish up.
Where'd it go?
I have very unhappy dogs. I lock them in the kitchen. I can't believe they've tore up
2
things
days?
I didn't think. I'm
2
sorry.
days in a row you've locked
Yeah.
them in the kitchen?
Yes. Usually if I teach all week, I take them to doggy daycare, and I thought, oh no, it's only 2 hours. They'll be fine. And wrong. All right, guys. Any questions before we jump back in? Some of you are new to this. Some of you have been doing this for a long time. And there are a lot of things to talk about when it comes to grant proposals. So I'm just trying to touch on a little of everything here. So please, if you have further questions or anything, I'm going to send some more resources out to you guys. Please just let me know, because I know this is a very short time, and I want to make sure, I was going to say you get your money's worth, but I want to make sure the SBDC gets their money's worth. So whatever you need help on, just please let me know. All right, so let's move on. So now, again, back to the typical components of a grant proposal. So we touched on that summary, on your organizational history, the problem or need in your community. And then the next thing is, sometimes it's called outcomes, sometimes it's called program goals. So these are what's going to happen, what we're promising the funder during the funding period, right? So when I say that problem definition has to be very specific, that 20% of the 100,000 people in my community are experiencing this, when we talk about proposed outcomes or goals, it's what's going to change for that 20%, that now there's going to be a change in 10% of them, right? So we're going to be very specific from the issue to the program goals. So the program goals are not the same as overall goals for your organization, right? Overall goals that that no one in our community is going to go hungry. Those are great goals. These are outcomes for the funding period. Now, the other sections, both methods and budget. So I talk about those together because they, in the proposal, just like that problem is connected to the outcome, the methods and the budget are tightly connected. So if we, again, the methods, that's a blueprint. That's everything we're going to do. So if we get the funding, right, they say, yes, we agree, we're going to do this. This section becomes our sort of plan of action. This is the section that's probably going to have the most detail. It might also include a timeline. It might include a logic model or a theory of change, right? So this is going to be the most detail. We talk about this with budget is because these things that we're doing here are the things that cost money. Methods cost money. So if you remember that, those really need to be closely connected. If in the methods section, I talk about the van that is going to transport my elderly citizens to a certain program, when I get to budget, right, I should see something about that van. Either we're purchasing it or we're renting it, or we have one and there's maintenance. So those two things should be tightly connected. So in your proposal, again, we're talking about a budget that is for this program, for what we're going to talk about. Does the budget also tell a story? You bet it does, right? It's really important. So there also might be in your guidelines, they may be asking for a budget narrative, some sort of budget description. So you may have to have the budget and the wording part of that as well. So be ready to do that if it's asked for. You may be able to put enough detail detailed, depending if it's a private founder, it's a local foundation, into the budget itself. You will probably, in the budget, so we always think about a budget in this being about what we're spending money on, but the budget, every good budget, right, has money coming in, money going out. So we have income and we have expenses. So where's the income coming in to support this project as well? We may have a need for $100,000 for the project. And so we may have 4 different funders that we're approaching for $25K a piece, right? So on the income side of this, we might be talking about other funders that are committed, that are pending, that we're going to approach. We might be talking about cash donations that are coming in from major donors that are earmarked for this project. We might have a lot of volunteers working on the project. We might have in-kind on the project, collaborating organizations who are giving us staff on this project. So all of those things are part of the income side of our budget. Now, you will probably also be asked in your guidelines for organizational budget. So different funders are going to ask for different things, right? So different kinds of financial reports. They might ask for your P&L or your profit and loss for the last year, the last 3 years. They might ask for an actual financial audit, right? And financial audits, as many of you know, are good to get, right? Because we know, I always liked going through the audit process, as crazy as it sounds, because I liked people just checking from the outside. Are we doing things correctly? Do we need to do anything differently? So they cost a lot of money, and the nobody requires us to do that. Funders, the IRS doesn't require it. Funders quite often require it. They want to see audited financials. If you're a really small organization, sometimes the funders will be okay with a financial review. So you might ask that question if that's a requirement. So when the funders are looking, right, at our budgets, right, you know, they're looking to see if we're in the black. Have we dipped into the red? How long have we been in the black? They're not, funders don't want to give money to us because we're in trouble, right? Not money to the sinking ship. They want to give money to our organization, again, to support, because our missions are in sync. They believe in the work that we're doing, and the effects of what we're doing are going to be around for a long time. In this kind of world that we're in right now, right, with the pandemic, things that have happened, in your budgeting process, you want to think about these sort of if-then scenarios. I have seen funders become much more comfortable with changes in budgets than they used to be, because this is sort of the real world. You need to think about when you're proposing, say, a project and you need a certain amount of money. Sometimes funders will ask us, what if you don't get all this money? What are you going to do, right? So you need to think about those scenarios. And sometimes work that we do is scalable, and sometimes it's not. If I'm doing a project where I say I'm going to teach 100 children in the school about something, and I don't get all the money I need, but I can scale that down and now I can reach 75 children, that might be perfectly fine. Some projects are not scalable. So what might happen if you don't get all the money that you need? Okay, now, again, back to our components, and let's talk about both evaluation and sustainability. When we talk about evaluation, and I would tell you as a grant reviewer, and I'd like to hear from our foundation person, when I review proposals, that both the evaluation section and probably the sustainability section are the weakest sections. So I want you to really understand this, understand what you need to do as an organization and what you need to convey to your funder. So in evaluation, there are two types of evaluation, and usually they will ask us about both types. Again, read those guidelines very carefully. They want to know outcome evaluation, which just says, did we do what we said we were going to do? And then process evaluation, which is a sort of that hard look at our methods. Is it going the way we thought it was going to go? So evaluation is not something you can think about when the reports are due. It's something that needs to be going on constantly in your organization. So if you aren't doing evaluation now is the time to start. And really it is so much about tracking, right? So if I don't have a baseline to begin, I can't talk about what things are going to change for that community I'm serving. So I'm going to start looking at exactly how many people we serve. If I'm the museum, how many people come to our events. We're going to think about what kind of evaluation are we going to do surveys. So we have to have the baseline survey. Are we going to do pre and post tests, right? Evaluation doesn't have to be overly complicated. I ran the AIDS organization here in the Springs for several years, and we did this program with the schools, right? And for evaluation, they had a little pre and post test that had like 5 questions on it. And I said, oh my God, what could you possibly learn from 5 questions from a group of teenagers, right? Oh, we learned a lot, right? We knew what kind of ideas they had prior and what they learned after going through our training, and the funders loved it. We really did make a difference. So if, again, 2 types of evaluation, make sure you're doing both of them. And I just want to say too, I mean, those of you, especially when I ran the AIDS project and you have those jobs that you feel like you're doing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, and sometimes we don't look up to see, are we getting to where we need to get, right? So that's our outcome evaluation. And are we doing it in the right way? So evaluation is not punishment from our funders. It is something we need to do to make our organizations excel.
And if you want me to jump in here, Linda, I'm glad to.
I would just love to have you.
Yeah. So I would say at the Community Foundation, a lot of our grants, as it relates to evaluation, are pretty basic. Our goal is to get our nonprofits comfortable with some of the language and starting evaluation and storytelling, so that when you apply for the bigger grants, you've had this stepping stool, this learning process, and you're more successful. We're not asking for a lot of quantitative complex, but we do want you to be able to articulate the change, where the needle has moved, challenges, successes. And so you'll see our post-grant reports are fairly simple, but they do ask you those thinking questions so you can start to get ready for those front range grant applications, which some of you get already and some of you don't, but it helps you keep aspiring to do more evaluation so you can qualify for those bigger grants on the front range and even regionally.
Brigham, you're a good and kind person with a good and kind foundation. And that is, because sometimes I will look at some that are just so complex. I go, we don't have the people to do it. We don't have the staff to do that. Right. So I really can't go after this funding. So I appreciate that very much. And let me give you just a couple of other examples. Like for the Little Art Center, that we had a grant that was really about diversifying our audience base, right? And nobody was tracking anything, small staff and whatever. So we had some events where truly we had, I don't know where we got these kids, if they're from the college or high school, with clipboards at the door, right? So people would walk in and they just again by sight think, okay, this is ethnicity, this is sexual identity, these are these things, right? So we could have an idea. Now the problem with having somebody really young do that is, you know, anybody over 30 was ancient to them, but they were fine. So I had a baseline of who was coming to our events, which was not very diverse at all at the beginning. So then we did this series of openings that were really kind of controversial and exciting. And we had one on sexuality, we had one on faith, we had one on, and the artists loved it. So we had these great openings. So we had, again, kids at the door doing this, and we had much bigger crowds, and they were doing the tallying for us, right? Not overly scientific. We could tell by look, but I didn't want to say to the funder, oh, we think this. We really had some hard numbers. So the kids who were doing this invented their own categories as well. So I also knew how many, say, men with ponytails and bald men attended my openings, which just told me I knew they were paying attention, right? So we had fun with it, whatever, but we achieved what we needed to achieve. We had another organization, a veterans organization, where they had really not gotten back in touch with people to see how they were doing. And I had volunteers from the Air Force Academy here do phone calls on a weekend. We got all the statistics. We knew whether we needed to change the program, all those kinds of things. Really, really simple. So don't get all excited about it. It's very positive and can make big differences in your organization. Okay, let's talk about, okay, we're doing good on time. Let's talk about sustainability a little bit. So here, so we're doing work that has a certain impact, right? Impact in our community, impact in our state, it could be impact nationwide. So if you put yourself in the shoes of the funder, right, what they want to know is that impact is going to continue. They may or may not give you continued funding, right? So again, think about the funder doesn't want to say, I'm giving you money for the women's shelter for the next year, and then a year after that, you don't want them to read in the paper that it closed for lack of funding, right? They've built up this wonderful program, all this stuff has happened. They want it to keep on for all the right reasons. So the practical side of that, when you're thinking about this for your organization, is if I am doing this program, it's the women's shelter, and the funder who helps us get that going that first year, you know, our budget's going to be larger. It's going to be facilities, it's going to be beds, it's going to be staff, it's going to be all of those things. I know, say that's a $500,000 project. I know to sustain this work, right? I have dipped in and bought all the things I need to get. It's about staff. It's about toiletries. It's about clothing. It's about things that keep it going. So first year, my budget is 500. The second year, it's 250. Following years, we think we can sustain this for 150 every year, right? So again, I'm conveying to the funder that I get it. I get not only what we have to do to build this program, but to continue the effect of the program. Brigham, did you have anything you wanted that could be helpful to folks about sustainability?
Yeah, that's something we coach on all the time. And also, you know, I have a funder in town who likes to start at X, so he's making an impact, and wind his way down, and expects for the nonprofit to share with him how they've backfilled that as he winds down. Because he doesn't want to cripple an organization by giving $40,000 and then going to zero.
Right.
But he also wants to see that backfill. Sustainable, you know, I sit on a lot of different grant making committees in town, and watching the grant reviewers who don't do it for a living, who might be volunteering, not understand why an organization is so excited that they now have 2 paid staff people and they need $40,000 to maintain this budget. Volunteer grant reviewers will be like, well, why'd they hire that second person? And, you know, I'm lucky I'm there to be able to say, this is an improvement. This is making them more robust in organization, but the connection's not made in the grant proposal. So now I no longer sit on that board. And so I don't know who's making those connections. But, you know, just always remembering, stepping back and saying, who's reviewing this? And why is this milestone important? And you know it intrinsically, but the reviewer doesn't. So when you're talking about sustainability, you know, walking them through the steps of, here are the milestones we've achieved, and here are the ones to go. But if you only talk about the ones that you're working toward, they don't realize you've already jumped over 3 hurdles. Good. And so that's important for a grant reviewer.
And remember, sometimes you have work that you do that is kind of the one and done thing, right? Maybe you've done a capital campaign, so you've built the building. The sustainability is about the maintenance of it, the staff to keep it running. So there are always projects like that, or just something that needs to be done, and it's not going to, it might have a continuing effect. You also might work with collaborators who are going to help take over a project or something like that. So explain those things. Those are the things that they want to know about going forward. So thank you so much, Regan. I'm so glad you're here with us today. Okay, let's move on. Sunshine is right on my screen. Not a complaint. I like the sunshine. All right. So the idea of collaboration, right? So funders will ask us about collaboration, right? It is not, again, I mean, it's, if you, again, always try to put yourself in their shoes. So things like if we have a nonprofit A and nonprofit B, and they're doing really the same kind of work in the community, funder might say, well, why aren't they working together in this? They could save money, they could save time, right? We want to show that we're being smart about what we do. If I am running a human services project in my community and I have a close connection with another organization that has great social workers that could help us on the project, that is a wonderful collaboration. Again, we're being smart. So think about, can we save money? Can we have a larger impact if we worked with others? And again, it is, I just want you to be smart about it. Now, in looking for funders, right? So there are lots of ways to do that. And, you know, in your own community, again, we have people like Brigham here, and I want you to be connecting locally and statewide with funders, always. This is always what we need to be doing. The databases out there are really great, right? So I used Foundation Center Online for years. Just recently, I've really been using GrantStation more. I like them both. It is just what you get used to, right? And doing your searches and what you get more comfortable with. When you are, oh, and the great thing about Foundation Center Online, and I forgot to check in your community, but libraries will often have subscriptions if they have a nonprofit center. So you can go to the library, use the product, do searches, email information back to yourself. It's really, really nice. And if they're called FINS, F-I-N-S, if your library is one of those, they also do classes on that system. So, and I've gone to their classes, and then when things changed, I would go back again, and they're really great. I love libraries. I think librarians are the smartest people in the world. If you're looking for government grants, grants.gov is where you need to go. A subscription is not required. There's not payment required. So again, just get in there and get comfortable with it. When we're looking for grants, when we're looking for funders, whatever database you're using. So sometimes people will look at funders and go, oh, they're somewhere else. They're not in my community. What we're looking for to see is if they give in my area. We talked a little bit about grant size, what is important, what's enough for you, right? And then this is like playing private eye, you guys, on looking at who funds your peers, who funds like organizations, maybe even in another area. And you need to get out there and do some research. The idea about how much you can get. So what I want you to be aware of is that range of giving that the funder says they have, right? So if their normal grants are $10,000 to $20,000. We don't go and make a $50K ask, right? They're just going to know we didn't do our homework. So I want you to be careful about that and what works for you. And sometimes you can have that conversation with them. Sometimes they want you to, and sometimes they don't. So when you're doing searchings, when you're doing the online searching, I think both GrantStation and Foundation Center Online. So the keywords that we use to do searching for our programs. So the keywords that are in the database are keywords that are supplied by the funder. So you need to be in that sort of mode where it's kind of trial and error and doing your searches and the words that you use, because I might be looking for funding for my teen program. And what might the funder call that? What words might they use? Tell me. Hello, I'm waiting.
With our shelter, it's usually victim services.
Victim services. Okay, great. What else?
Domestic violence.
Okay.
Prevention.
Youth services.
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing. Adolescents versus teens versus children. So just make a list of those keywords. So if you're searching for Fed opportunities on grants.gov, there is a place where we can put in keywords, but we can also set up a search so that I will get emails about opportunities as they arise, right? So it's a good way to sort of start zeroing in on verbiage that the government agencies use that I don't use. I'll put something in that I think is really, really straightforward, and then I get the oddest results for work in Haiti that has nothing to do with what I do, right? So you get to play with that a little bit. So they just send you emails. They're very short. They're very concise. This is what came up. If it's of interest to you, you can click on and go through. Okay. So think about that. All right. We're doing on time. All right. So let's talk about keeping track a little bit of when you're doing searching. So there are lots of great systems out there, and you might have some great fundraising database or donor database that lets you do your grant tracking as well. It's all that is perfectly fine, just so you do it, right? So I have a little spreadsheet that I use that we're going to share with you as well. Nothing fancy. It's really a calendar. Tells me who my potential funder is, amount that they might fund, if I've gotten them, when reports are due. It's just a great little spreadsheet. I'm going to send that to you, and you may look at it, because I go into different client organizations and I go, well, this doesn't work for them, and I change something in it. So the thing is, if I'm doing research, right, I'm trying to find good partners to work with, good funders to work with. I want to go, okay, here's when their proposals are due. I want to get them into my calendar. I also like to keep a probability. If I think there's a really strong match, right, it has an 80% probability in my brain. It will help me because maybe I can't do all of those grant proposals. It helps me prioritize. It also helps me as I'm developing a pipeline of possible funders to track. Was I right on that? They said absolutely no. I gave them a 50% and they said, oh yeah, we love this. So I'm trying to get, again, those relationships and that tracking in place. The other thing I like to do with this is keep a list of, I call them the don't even bothers, because, you know, you're doing your research and you're in that research mode and you're doing all this. And I find this great funder and I think, okay, great, I'm going to contact them. And then I have to kind of dig through their information to find that they only fund in Cleveland, Ohio or something, right? I go, gosh darn it, right? So I put them on the don't even bother list, because I don't know about you and your memories, but if 3 months later I go, why didn't I apply to them? They're such a great fit, right? I'm going to remember now because I have them listed there. So again, it's whatever system works best for you. And being really honest about it. So we'll send you that as a tool as well. Now, the relationship with your funder, not only at the beginning, but as things move on. So when we talk about evaluation, right, we're tracking, we're doing, things may be going on track, or maybe there's an issue and there are things that we need to change budget-wise, program-wise. We want to continually have that relationship with the funder that is about honesty and transparency and what's going on with our program. So I have an example of working, I forgot who maybe it was Health Foundation had given us money to do some work with the kids in school. And we promised, right, that we were going to, there were so many schools and so many children. And so they came in at the end of the process, sort of to do an audit and talk about what happened. And one of our schools had backed out, and which is fine. I didn't relay that to the funder. I didn't do anything about it. They weren't very happy. And truthfully, I think they would have helped us with an introduction to another school to keep that program, you know, going and robust. But I wasn't watching, I wasn't doing what I needed to do. And luckily they didn't take the money back. They could have though, right? That was the right, because we promised a certain thing that didn't happen. So keep that relationship just utmost and keep in touch with them as much as you need to. I wanted to say a couple of things about online applications and doing that. You know, we always say that we want to, that's an online application. We're going to do all of our writing in Word and we're going to check everything out. We're going to do word and character counts and everything so that when it gets to that online application, we can just paste it in. So again, here's a don't do what I do thing. I've so many times I've done that. I paste it into the online application and then I decide I need to make changes. And that's where I introduce my errors. That's where I introduce my typos. That's where I put in more words and all of a sudden the bottom is cut off. So be very careful and very truthful about that. The idea about our writing, again, our writing doesn't have to be perfect. I'm sure Brigham will say that as well. What I want you to do is get really picky about it, because things that we do incorrectly are distractions, right? And so I don't want that reviewer to be distracted because I don't know the difference between there, and there, right? it get my proposal thrown out? No, of course it doesn't, but it is a distraction. So we all have our things that are distractions to us when we read. Like I just hate passive voice, right? I think is much weaker. I really want active voice. It drives me crazy when people don't know how to use conjunctions and semicolons appropriately, right? So those are things I'm reading and I zero in on that. I shouldn't, right? But I do. So I just wanted to have a little fun here at the end with a couple of things and how it changes the meaning of the work that we're doing. So commas that are used incorrectly can have a very different meaning, right? The Oxford comma, when I teach classes, especially in university settings about grant proposal writing, sometimes I think that people are going to like sort of come to fisticuffs about the Oxford comma and whether it should be used or not. So, the difference again between these two and using that comma in the second sentence after Superman gives a different meaning. So sometimes institutions, larger institutions, will have policies in their writing about whether it's used or not. So what I think that some of us were taught years and years and years about, yes, we use that comma and others weren't. So I want consistency. Incorrect use of the apostrophe, the your and your, big difference in what we convey. So those were just for fun, and you probably have things that that drive you crazy as well. So think about those. Always having our proposals read by someone else is great. I like to have somebody in my proposal who's not connected to what I do, right? Not for just finding typos and things like that, but I want them to say, I don't know what you're talking about in this paragraph. Perhaps I've used terminology they're not familiar with, those kinds of things. So finding somebody outside my circle to look at it. If I'm not good with budgets, having somebody look at budgets and review and make sure it makes sense, that it matches up with my methodology and my activities is really important. So finding somebody in your life to do that with, I think is really important for us. Okay, we have time for some discussion and questions, or is there anything else that we'd like to put on the table? Brigid, do you have anything, other pieces of wise advice for our group today?
Yeah, sure. So one thing I want to make sure everybody knows about is on our website is a list of grants and deadlines. And so you can always go there. And I think if we don't, we will list some that we don't manage, but are out there. And so the deadline for Ballantine Family Fund for this next quarter was yesterday. So starting today is a fresh, clean slate. And if you haven't applied, you can apply for Ballantine. You can apply once a year. And I just put in the chat, if you are on our Facebook or our Instagram, you will get updates on what we're up to. If you're not a good repeat visitor to websites, which I'm not, so I totally get it. We try and get things out that way. As it relates to grants, I think it's great advice to get somebody to read it outside of your world, because they'll be able to share with you what doesn't make sense to somebody who's reading it that doesn't know your organization, or even if they do know your organization, maybe some of the holes there. And anybody that knows us knows that your financials are very important to us, and we want them clean. We want them accurate. That makes us feel really good about your organization. They don't have to be sophisticated, but we want you to be able to answer some basic questions about those. And if we can't figure it out ourselves, we'll call you. And so I think just about everybody on this call today has probably received a call or two from us, just getting clarification, because a lot of times it's not the Community Foundation staff that makes the decision. We have to have the knowledge to sell your ask to others who make the decision. And so I think that's really important to keep in mind, that we're not usually the final decision makers. There's always a committee. We don't want to be judge and jury as staff, because we work with you on a lot of different levels. So if we call you, it's not anything except for we're trying to make sure we can do your organization justice.
Brigande, I used to work for the Gill Foundation and the Gay and Lesbian Fund, and the Gay and Lesbian Fund used to have that community panel that made the decisions. And watching them in action, it was like watching a jury make, because they would have, say, their favorites because they did site visits, and so they'd be sort of fighting for that one, and then another one would have issues with it. So it was a great process to watch. I enjoyed it a great deal, and so I'm glad to hear that you guys do that.
Yeah.
So what would you tell them about, it sounds like your organization is very open to contact and to questions. Is that true? And are there questions that drive you crazy, or anything that you want to warn them about?
Yeah, so I would say it's so important to us. We spend a lot of time in this office writing instructions and trying to be very clear in the grant application. So do that first. Make sure you read, you think about it, and then call with questions. It's hard for us to take you from point A to point B if you haven't tried first. And we get a lot of those phone calls. I've never done this, so can you just tell me how to do it? And that's not a fair question, because if you know one nonprofit, you know one nonprofit. So everybody needs to tell their own story, but we are here for clarifications and questions. We're just not here to answer questions that are right there in the instructions.
Good. Yeah, some funders will say no contact. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's not us.
If they say no contact, they mean it. So don't try to go around. Don't try to do anything. You're just going to irritate them. Do whatever their process is. And and then sometimes when we get rejected, right? They may or may not give us information on why, right? That may or may not be their policy. But asking questions about what could we do better? Do you recommend we try applying again next year? Is a great one, because that really may mean you're just new to them this year. That when you came in, they already used up a lot of the funding, a lot of other things going there. So really think about the kinds of questions that you want to ask that'll make it worth it.
Right. And we always recommend people really, you think outside the box. If they say no contact, certainly don't contact them, but they probably have a list of grantees. And if you know one of those grantees, call them. How'd you get this grant? What do you think was the winning factor? Do you have any expertise or advice for me writing this grant this year? Just because they say no contact doesn't mean you can't contact others. If you know somebody who used to work there, a lot of us on this call, if you've been around, know Camilla, who used to be at Anschutz. Well, now she's at the Dental Associates. So if you need to call Camilla about Anschutz to get some inside scoop, you can do that. Or she's now at the Delta Dental, and they're doing grants, mostly healthcare related. But you could always call her and say, now that you've moved, what are you looking for? So use those relationships that Rural Philanthropy Days has offered many of you on this call, some relationships with some funders. Don't let that go stale.
So when we talked about looking at their 990s, so we can, again, when I go back 3 years, so I do that with nonprofits. I go back and I go, okay, I don't know they've asked me to do consulting work. I don't know anybody on the board right now, but I look and go, oh, my buddy Angie was on 3 years ago. She can kind of give me some scope and some background here. So it's the same thing. You really are kind of playing detective here and do what you need to do. Just don't step on toes or do anything, again, that they've asked you not to do. So you guys, there are a lot of topics in here, depending on what you do, on that we can talk about for a long time, about logic models or indirect costs or things like that. So this is just sort of the dive into this. And if you have follow-up questions on any of those things, please send me an email or call, and I'm so very glad to help and chit chat with you about those things. Brigid, thank you for being here with us today. This is the unexpected joy. I appreciate it so very much.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the group?
I have a quick question. Thank you so much. This has been really helpful. And this is a question kind of to you, Linda, but also perhaps Brigid, as people who have sat on the review panels. I recently came across a funding opportunity, and during a webinar, the person said that they typically receive around 100 applications. And there was no indication or information on any screening process. There wasn't like a two-step process. So I'm kind of curious, is the panel reading thoroughly all 100 applications, or is there a formal or even informal way of doing that screening, that skimming? How does that work? 100 is a lot. So I'm just curious. Like, how does one stand out among 100?
Brigid, you want to hit that
Sure.
first?
So Sharon, if you know one grant review process, you know one grant review process. I mean, it's just like that. But I would say that the ones I've sat on, usually you get assigned. So there might be 6 people on the panel and they get a 1/6 of the applications, and you review and you become the champion to those. In some processes, you're encouraged to call the nonprofits for any clarification so you can be their champion. In others, you're only allowed to use the information within the document itself. To make yourself stand out, I think are a couple things. Some really clever turn of words so that people can go, oh, they were the organization that said X. Or a storytelling, oh, remember, they're the ones that had that story about why, and it really made things come to life. And so this is where, when Linda said, you know, this is where the really good, well-written grants with those techniques in them make a difference. And now I sit on NHUNGR grant review, and we're doing our last grant review. I have to leave at 11 for that. And that is an organization that really preaches, do not penalize them for the commas, for the misspellings, for those kinds of things. And so that's a different kind of review. So like I said, everybody's a little different. For LPA Roundup, everybody looks at those applications before the meeting. And they do the Roundup in education. For Ballantine, we review internally, and then the trustees, you know, may skim and then really look for me to champion each one. So that's like 30 a quarter. So that's kind of, we as grant writers, our grant reviewers really need to keep a DEI lens in place. But human nature takes over if you're not really conscious about it. And those well-written pieces with the turn of phrase or the good storytelling always are easy to remember. And
they stick with you, right? I mean, just think about, because we do, no matter, even if they're only reading 10 of them, that's a lot. That's a lot. So we want to stand out. The peer review process for government grants. Now, I would encourage anybody who's interested to apply to become a peer reviewer for government grants. You learn a lot, and normally they're looking for certain expertise. Say you are in education, you might go to Department of Education and apply to be a peer reviewer there. The process is very intense. And to tell you the truth, I've done it a couple of times. In one of the organizations I did it for were these grants that were like 100 pages long. And oh my God, I just don't think I'd do it again. So I have another one that I'm thinking about that's maximum pages of 20. 100 is just too much for me. But we were assigned a certain number, just like she's talking about. And another group over here, I think it was regionally, had certain numbers. So that government agency had gotten letters, LOIs, but letters of an intent to apply. So they kind of knew how many were coming in and how many they were going to have to assign. So again, it's a great process, and I thought it was very equitable, but it's tough. It's tough going. So if I found one with a personal story in it, believe me, I'd be very happy. Anything else, you guys? Look at us. 3 minutes to go. We are good timing. So anything else? Again, Hannah will send you my contact information. I have a few things I'm going to send out to you in addition, I just happened this morning to get an email from Grant Station that also included some grant opportunities. So if you get signed into them and get onto their list, you will get that information as well. And I've got a couple other things I will send as well. So I thank you so much for being so interactive and so helpful to each other. I appreciate it. And it was a joy to meet all of you. And I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
Linda.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Linda. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.